Hey, everybody. Welcome back to TCG Virtual Service. We are incredibly grateful to be here. We were having a few little technical problems, so we apologize. Thank you for your patience as we're jumping on just a couple minutes later than usual. So, hi. How are you?
I'm tired.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about that. How's this week been?
Wow.
It's interesting what simmers under the surface, isn't it, when we give it a chance?
Man, it's been a really hard week. We've had so many phone calls this week from families, from referrals from other organizations for our emergency family shelter we're running. If you've ever been in our building, most of you have. It's a very small building for a public space. So we have a capacity of fire capacity. So it's not our choice on numbers. It's fire code of 15 individuals that can sleep there overnight. And so that's 4 families. So we've been at capacity consistently now for weeks, really since the first couple of weeks after our opening. And this has been the first week we've had to go back and tell resources and families, like, we can't. We've worked tirelessly to try to help those resources find something else, but every other resource in our city is full and waiting lists. And when you have absolutely no other option, that is overwhelming. And on a personal note, we've had a lot of illness going around our little team, our shelter team, and that's been a lot. Around our church family, that's been a lot. Around all of our different outreaches. I know the outreach center feels that, the weight of that. Our street outreach is seeing that, and our shelter for sure is seeing that. And I currently have 2 babies home with fevers and not feeling good. And the driving force tonight is, like, I'm so grateful that my kids have a chance to sleep on a couch and rest and get better. And there's so many in the city that do not. And to open up a space to give them that place to just rest and lay their head is really important. So it's been a heavy week.
So I think one of the things that I have found myself thinking about a lot this week, as we continue to creep closer and closer to Christmas and this Advent season, as we have had to say more no's this week than we've ever had to say before because we are full. And every single one of them is felt deeply. And every single time that we have to say we don't have space and we don't have capacity, which was what prompted kind of this outcry on Facebook last night, where we just tried to share our heart. And we tried to say, like, these are our Christmas prayers and our Christmas wishes is that we need a bigger space to do family shelter. We need a second church to partner with us to be an overflow space so that we don't have to turn families away. We need more volunteers to run both of those spaces or a combined larger space. But one of the things that I just find myself thinking about a lot is I am so familiar with the Christmas story. You know, so many of us are. And sometimes I think that when we become really familiar with a story, that it just becomes so routine that sometimes we lose the emotional connection with it because it's like, oh yeah, I know the story. But I think for me, the emotional connection this week has come in so much more when I think about the descriptions of Bethlehem, right? That everyone was coming for this census is the story, right? Whether that's historically accurate or not is sometimes debated, but nonetheless, the inns and the hotels and, you know, whatever they were, the hostels at that time, they were full to capacity. And so, you know, in comes this family in crisis. In comes this family with a mother to be that is just about to give birth, with an exhausted and terrified father to be who is worried and just trying to figure things out. And I'm sure was probably a little bit on edge and a little bit triggered. And we've seen that some this week, especially of like, I'm just trying to figure out an answer. And I found myself connecting with the Christmas story so much this week in that moment of like knocking on the door with like an anxious expectation of hope that there's going to be a dry space to lay down. There's going to be a place to rest. There's going to be a place to, just exist and to be for that night. And then to be told there's no room at the inn. And to be told, I'm sorry, we can't help you, and to be turned away. And scripture doesn't tell us if, this particular innkeeper that allowed them to stay in the stable was the one and only innkeeper, or if that was the only door that they had to knock on. But I have to believe that that's probably not the case. I have to believe that they probably knocked on several doors that night out of desperation and trying to figure something out. And I have to believe that the answer over and over was, I'm sorry, there's not room. I'm sorry, there's not space. And I think sometimes we miss the heaviness of that piece of the story, because if you've never been on either side of that, if you've never been the one knocking on the door, asking for help and refuge in a night that is getting colder and colder by the moment, and you're terrified and you need to figure something out for your family. And if you've never had to be the one that has to say, I'm so sorry, I wish we had space, but we don't, you miss the tension that is embedded in the heart of this Christmas narrative. This tension that says there's just not space for you. There's not space for you to exist. There's not space for you to lay down and rest. There's not space for you to sleep and have a meal. And it is connected with my spirit so much this week, because I think I feel that same kind of emotion. I know that the circumstances are dramatically different, and I recognize that. But I think that there is something about our city and our lack of capacity, right? And our lack in so many spaces of just hospitality and the ability to open doors. But I think what rubs my spirit in a way that is so incredibly difficult is ours is not necessarily saying, no, we can't help you because every building is full. A lot of times ours is saying, no, I can't help you because my building is empty and I want to keep it empty. And I would rather tell people, no, that you can't be here and you're not welcome here, than to make ourselves uncomfortable and have to figure out what that would look like to accommodate a need. And so, this week of Advent is kind of a messy week. It's a hard week. And it's a week that has kind of been in juxtaposition of like the emotional space that we have really felt, because this week of Advent is typically the week that we celebrate this theme of joy. And I think when we think of joy, so often we mistakenly lump joy in with happiness. And we mistakenly get this perception that to celebrate with joy means that we have to feel really happy and wonderful and great and all the warm, fuzzy feelings. And I don't know that that's the case. And I want to read something for you as we get started. And then Holly's going to lead us in a song. But I want to read this for you. Let me pull it up. And it simply says this. Okay, this is from one of my favorite pastors, one of my favorite just great theological thinkers. His name was Howard Thurman, just an amazing man, a man whose ministry and life and writing heavily influenced the ministry of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others in the civil rights movement. But I want to read this to you. This is a transcript of a conversation that Thurman gave while he was still alive around the topic of joy. And I think, again, Thurman was living in the midst of Jim Crow and in the midst of systematic injustice and inequity. And I think there was a lot of times that he felt this rub too, where it's hard to feel joyful when nothing feels right. And so this is what Thurman spoke into this space. He says, sometimes joy comes silently, opening all closed doors and making itself at home in the desolate heart. It has no forerunner, save itself. It brings its own welcome and its own salutation. Sometimes joy is compounded by many elements: a touch of sadness, a whimper of pain, a harsh word tenderly held until all of its arrogance dies, the casting of an eye into the face that understands, the clasp of a hand that holds, then releases, a murmur of tenderness where no word is spoken, the distilled moment of remembrance of a day or a night, an hour lived beyond the sweep of the daily round. Joy is often compounded by many things. There is earned joy, an impossible job tackled and conquered, leaving no energy for asserting the price or measuring the cost. Only the all-inclusive sense of well-being in the mind and slowly creeping through the crevices of the spirit. It may be the same dread that repaired its head, gathering itself that not all hope is unassigned until it has become the master of the house. Then relief comes through the fresh knowledge and insight of clearer vision. And I read that earlier this week, and I've gone back to it several times because this idea that joy is earned, this idea that joy, like so many of the other themes of Advent that we've talked about, hope and peace, intermingles into the darkness, into the hard spaces, into the fear and the anxiety. And I think about that original Christmas night, and I think about all of the emotions that Joseph and Mary must have felt in that space. I think about the fear. I think about the uncertainty. I think about the questions that must have tumbled through their spirits and through their minds, whether they were spoken or not between the two of them. I imagine what it was like to not have help or support in a process of bringing an infant into the world, which was painful, which was terrifying. I think of all of the places in the Christmas story where poverty is intersecting, where need is clear, where there are so many places of, I need help, I need something, I need, medical support, I need a place to be, I need clean, spaces to give birth to this baby. And those things didn't necessarily come. But it was in the midst of darkness and, less than ideal conditions that this little baby enters into a world that was still completely full of brokenness and injustice and inhumanity. And in that moment, there was this ability for all of those things to coexist at once. And like Thurman writes in his essay, where he says, it has no forerunner, save itself. It brings its own welcome and its own salutation. And if we think about that Christmas story, in that moment, there was not royal greetings, right? There was not great adulation in that initial moment. Like, yes, the angels rejoiced after Jesus was born. And yes, the shepherds came to worship in that space. But in that initial moment, joy was ushered in by two terrified teenagers and a screaming baby in the darkness who had been told, no, we can't help you, again and again and again that night. Holly's been leading us in a song every week that we've gone through Advent. This is a song that we tend to use a lot at TCG during Christmas season. And I just feel like the lyrics are so appropriate in this moment. It's a song that is kind of a play on words from a popular Christmas tune that many of us grew up singing, "O Come All Ye Faithful." But this is a song that says, "O come all you unfaithful." And so I just want to invite you, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you have faced today, no matter how many times that you have asked for help and been told no, no matter how hard it is to ask for help, no matter what condition of mental health you have today, no matter what physical conditions you face, no matter what addictions you wrestle with, No matter what doubts you carry, I want you to know that when that tiny baby entered into this world, when that tiny baby entered in through circumstances that seemed incredibly complex and adversarial, when everything seemed like it was stacked against these two teenagers, this baby came, and it did not make things all better. It did not make everything sunshine and rainbows, but instead, this baby represented the prospect of something greater than what anyone in that moment understood. And what I think I want all of us to remember this week of Advent, this journey towards the holiness that is Christmas, is that that's really what Christmas is all about. It's the possibility. It's the what could be. What could happen if there was space? What could happen if we make space for a story that seems so incredibly unlikely? But more importantly than that story is the life and the example of love that grew from that moment. And so I just want to invite you to listen to these words, listen to these lyrics, and just know that you are welcome. You are welcome in this space. You are welcome in all things connected to TCG. But more importantly, you are welcome and wanted in the heart and in a relationship with a God who sees you, who hears you, who knows you by name, and who desperately loves you.
Oh, come, all you unfaithful, come, weak and unstable, come. No, you are not alone. Oh, come, barren and waiting ones, weary of praying, come, see what your God has done. Christ is born, Christ is born, Christ is born for you. Oh, come, bitter and broken, come, with fears unspoken, come, taste of his perfect love. Oh, come, guilty and hiding ones, there is no need to run. See what your God has done. Christ is born, Christ is born, Christ is born for you. He's the Lamb who was given, slain for our pardon. His promise is peace to those who believe. He's the Lamb who was given, slain for our pardon. His promise is peace for those who believe. So come, though you have nothing, come. He is the offering, come. See what your God has
So I want to read a section of Psalm 95 to you. As Holly sang these lyrics that proclaim, O come, bitter and broken one. O come and see what your God has done. I want you to meditate on these words. These words were written by a psalmist. They were not written by David. Much of the Psalms was written by David, but a good portion of it was written by other artists and poets. And this one in particular says this: Come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come to him with thanksgiving. Let us sing psalms of praise to him. For the Lord is a great God, a king above all gods. God holds in his hands the depths of the earth and the mightiest of mountains. The sea belongs to God, for God made it. His hands formed the dry land. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God. We are the people that he watches over, the flock under his care. I think the invitation to come, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you face, no matter what obstacles, this beautiful, all-inclusive invitation that says, come and worship, come and shout joyfully in this space. Like we just talked about, I think sometimes it feels like I can't come if I'm not joyful. Let me be really clear. That's not what scripture's saying. And that's not what the heart of God is saying. And I understand that there are some churches that may portray that message, but I truly believe that when we come, whether we are feeling joy or not, happiness or not, whether we are engulfed in any emotion, the act of come to a community, to a relationship, to something that is bigger than ourselves, reorientates us in a space of struggle. And I think there's something really beautiful about this idea that when I come into relationship, when I come into community, when I come to be part of something that's bigger than myself, that the heaviness that is in my heart shifts a little bit. And there is space made, like Howard Thurman wrote, for something to coexist in that space. So another book that's a favorite of mine, because I really love spaces where we can explore interfaith dialogue, right? Sometimes I think we need to see what it looks like when two people who believe in big things, though they might not line up 100% on everything, whether those are denominational differences, whether those are just religious background differences, theological differences. So one of my favorite books, and I actually gave a copy of this book to my college student recently, who has been reading it and will sometimes text me quotes from it, is the Book of Joy. And the Book of Joy is written as a conversation, and it goes back and forth in this conversation between Archbishop Desmond Tutu of the Episcopal Church and the Dalai Lama, who is Buddhist and practices a different foundational belief than Tutu, but they have this beautiful friendship and this beautiful ability to transcend their differences. And so in this conversation about joy, they write something really profound that I wanted to introduce into our conversation tonight, because I know it has been hard. It's been a hard week. It's been a hard month. It's a hard season, especially from some of the vantage points that we see sometimes. But I'm going to give you two pieces of this. I'm going to start with what Desmond Tutu says. And he says this. He writes, "We are wired to be caring for one another and generous to one another. We shrivel when we are not able to interact. I mean, that is part of the reason why solitary confinement is such a horrendous punishment. We depend on each other in order to be fully who we are. This is the concept of Ubuntu. A person is a person through other persons." So Ubuntu is an African philosophy, an African perspective, an African virtue that says, I am because you are. It essentially is this proclamation that believes our humanity is wrapped up in one another. I can't be fully myself if I'm ignoring the needs of somebody around me. And so Tutu says that we are wired to be caring for one another. And then the Dalai Lama responds and adds to by saying this: I've sometimes joked and said that God doesn't know very much about math, because when you give to others, it should be that you are subtracting from yourself. But in this incredible kind of way, I've certainly found that to be the case so many times, that when you give, it seems that in fact you are making space for more to be given to you. And this idea that joy, even in the hardest of spaces, even in the most difficult of seasons, can often be found by coming into community, by being reminded that you're not alone, by coming into spaces where you can help to meet needs, as well as in those moments when you think you're the one making the difference, often discovering that you are being blessed, you are being challenged, and joy seeps into those spaces and makes room for the impossible in those spaces. And so I want to challenge you and me. Where is a space, Holly, in a week that's been really hard, in a season that's been really hard? Where is a space where you have seen joy seep in to the darkness because you have seen community, because you have seen connection, because you have seen people responding to one another with compassion and meeting those needs in that space, whether that's for you personally or some other interaction that you've witnessed in the season? Can you think of one?
I mean, I probably have quite a few actually little moments, but because I think my tendency is to like cling to every little moment that's positive, because things have been so heavy. This last week there was a night that I was up at shelter. My kiddos were there with me, and we came all together. And I kind of was designated the one that was going to try to find something fun to do with kiddos. We try really hard to try to make sure that there's some space that's just fun and lighthearted, especially when parents need to kind of sit down and do some case management stuff, try to figure out their plans. Also just the normal activities of like showering and laundry and gathering your stuff to get ready to go to bed and get up the next day. And so I gathered all the kiddos on the stage, and we sat down and we cut snowflakes, and we made it snow because there were so many little white pieces everywhere of snow. But all of our little kiddos that are hanging out in our building and calling it home right now for a season, they put their name on snowflakes up on our tree. And just the joy as mom and dads walked into the room, kiddos were like, look, that's my snowflake on the tree. Like that's just that sense of belonging and that sense of ownership. And it was paper and pipe cleaners and markers. Like it was such an insignificant, simple thing. But it just was super meaningful. That same day, the ability for me to hang out with kiddos came from the fact that one of our larger organizations here in Springfield signed up to do dinner that night. And I think they brought about 10 people with them. And they brought this phenomenal meal and desserts, and they came in with every intention of serving our families and just like loving them. And they just found spaces to fit the entire time. They brought presents for all of our kiddos. And it was just a really sweet moment to see the love of an organization and employees that have never met these families. Honestly, an organization that I've not personally worked with a whole lot before, that just came in with the exact same heartbeat to just love and shower with just words of encouragement and belonging. And the little bit of time we got to spend together, I was just blown away by the personalness of so many of those stories and their reasonings for being there, that were just able to lift people up. And so it was a moment like that night. Definitely, it took a lot longer to get kids down, but it was a night because there was so much excitement and joy and just happiness. And like you said, joy and happiness don't go together, but it's really sweet when you see joy that kind of triggers that space, especially in kiddos, and the lightheartedness that can come from that. So
yeah, that's beautiful. I think one of the moments this week for me that just reminded me that joy can be found in every space, no matter how hard, no matter how difficult. And like we just said, it's often found in those spaces that are sacrificial and that are compassionate and that are loving beyond ourselves. Um, I I had stopped and was engaging with someone the other day outside, and it was someone that was new and was very scared. And shelters have been closed all week because it's been warmer. Um, it's been rainy most of the week, so it's not a lot of fun to be wet and cold and only have it be 40, 41, 42 degrees at night. But nonetheless, shelters have been closed, and that's made it challenging for some people, especially newer people that maybe don't have enough supplies or know what to have, and those kind of things. And as I was talking to this individual, and I was getting them some supplies from my car that I had, I saw a familiar face that has been on the streets of our city for quite some time. Someone that's very well seasoned, that is normally very prepared, and tries to plan ahead, and those kind of things, because they know the dangers that come with the winter, and especially these weird seasons of warmer temperatures but wet temperatures. And I said hi, and they said hi. What are you guys doing? And I just kind of explained that this individual was newer, and I introduced the two of them. This is a safe person that you can trust. This is a safe person that you could ask questions, or if you see them, to know that you could ask for help if you need something, that kind of thing. And immediately it was like I wasn't even in that space. And it was like, okay, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you need this? And they just started pulling things out of their backpack and like giving these things that I knew this person had carefully procured for themselves to protect themselves. And it was just like giving it without a second thought to, the vulnerability that might put them in. And they were just like, oh, you need this and you need this, and here's a poncho, and here's an umbrella, and you can tie trash bags around your feet inside your shoes so your feet don't get wet, and like just all these little tricks. And they were pulling this stuff out. And then they were done. They were like, where are you going to next? And they said, I don't know. And they said, okay, well, here's where I'm going. There's a meal here, so why don't you walk with me and I'll show you. And so I totally like kind of was like, okay, do you need anything else from me? Because again, like it was like I was not even there anymore. And I looked at my old friend who was standing with my new friend. But I looked at my old friend and I said, okay, so do we need to get you some stuff to replace all these things that you just shared? And he looked at me with the biggest smile on his face, and he was like, nope, I'll be okay. He goes, I was having a really rough day, and this made me feel so good to be able to help somebody and to give some of these things away, because I know how important these things are, and I know how to replace these things. And I watched them as they walked down towards dinner, and they were laughing and they were talking and they were connecting. And it was one of those moments where, an old friend was having a hard day, and I knew that. They'd been struggling for a little while, and to see like the lightness in them that I hadn't seen in a while kind of return, because they had leaned into this place of compassion that had kind of rejuvenated, I think, some joy in their spirit. And also somebody who was just really struggling, feeling so scared and overwhelmed. That doesn't mean that they still didn't feel anxious and that they still didn't feel worried. But for that moment, they knew that they were seen and they weren't alone. And I think it was just such a beautiful picture for me this week that I've thought about a lot of all of this concept we've talked about tonight of joy, and what it means to lean in and try to create joy, even in spaces that are dark and are hard and that face big obstacles. To be reminded that we can come into a space and bring what we have, even if that's just a listening ear, even if that's just a hug or a smile, whether it's outreach supplies, whether it's a yes, we have space for you, come in, be safe, whether it's a meal, whatever that looks like. When we come, no matter our background, into this present moment, and we show up and we love out loud, I think that there is joy that is stirred up in that space. And I just want to challenge you this Christmas season, this Advent week, as we meditate on the concept of joy, to never feel disqualified from a connection, from seeking, from reaching out because you feel emotions that you feel like maybe can't be present with joy. Because joy, I think, coexists in all spaces when we're willing to say, I'm going to hold this hard stuff here, but with this hand, I'm going to reach out and I'm going to love and I'm going to lean into people and I'm going to let people, I'm going to offer people into my space, but I'm also going to take an invitation to step into space with people when I need that too, because I think that's part of what helps us kind of create balance, even in some of the hardest of spaces. So Holly's going to lead us in one last song. This is a song we have not done this Christmas season, but it's so incredibly beautiful. It's a song that reminds us that Jesus was not born into ease, into comfortableness. God did not send Jesus down into opulence and, just this cushy existence. That from the moment that Jesus entered into this world, there was opposition, there was danger, there was a lot of hard emotions. And again, I think we forget that so often. We forget that these beautiful pieces of a story that we've come to romanticize so much existed against a backdrop that was terrifying. And part of that backdrop is the fact that even after Jesus's birth, there were prophecies that existed that said that this baby that would be born would eventually become king. And there was a misconception by so many, including people in power, that meant that this little baby stood a political threat. And so there was an entire campaign to seek and to kill and murder and destroy innocent baby boys when they believed that this prophecy had been fulfilled. And so in an effort to protect Jesus, Mary and Joseph have to flee with this infant, and they have to flee as refugees into another country where they know no one, where they essentially are homeless and they are on the run. And so all of these spaces where sometimes I think, again, we feel like, God doesn't understand. There's not room for my struggle and my heartache. All of those pieces are really embedded into the story of the birth of Jesus and the young life of Jesus and his parents. And so this song that Holly's going to lead us in is a song called Refugee King. And I just want you to listen to this and be challenged to have a bit of a different perspective on joy, on Christmas, and on a Savior that knows what it's like to struggle.
Away from the manger they ran for their lives. The crying boy Jesus, a son they must hide. A dream came to Joseph, they fled in the night. They ran and they ran and they ran. Oh, no stars in the sky, but the Spirit of God led down into Egypt from Herod to hide. No place for his parents, no country or tribe. They ran and they ran and they ran. Stay near me, Lord Jesus, when danger is nigh. us from Herods and all of their lies. I love the Lord Jesus, the refugee King. And we sing and we sing and we sing. And we sing and we sing and we sing. Alleluia. 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 Alleluia.
May you be brave enough this holiday season to reach out. May you be brave enough to trust people and spaces, to realize that you need to not be alone and isolated this holiday season. And I recognize that it's extra challenging for us because we are in a virtual space and there's not the normal building to gather in and hugs to give, but help is always there when we reach out. And all it takes is a text message or a phone call or an email that says, I could really use somebody. Do you have time to talk? Can we grab coffee? And I want to invite you and challenge you to be doing that, because even in places that feel incredibly hard, joy comes in a space of connection. And so I want to encourage you to be reminded of that truth. Top 3 for this week. Our biggest one, I think, is what we have kind of been talking about and alluding to, and that's just the need for space, the need for partnerships, the need for additional spaces to open to help meet the needs of families and individuals. We need more crisis cold weather spaces in this city. So if you are part of a faith community that is not TCG, and you're part of a faith community that is not opening its doors to somebody in some capacity and saying, we will make room for you, then I'm going to challenge you to have conversations. Why does our building sit empty? What is the reason for that? Because I think we have to be having those hard conversations in this city. Unlike Bethlehem, also long ago, again, the answer for us a lot of times isn't no because the end is full. It's no because we are prioritizing buildings over people. And that's something that I think deeply grieves the heart of God and my heart as well. Our second big announcement is that we are making just a few scheduling changes. We've been hosting Sober Support every week. We host that on Tuesday nights at the Outreach Center, but we are going to adjust that. It's been a really hard season, I think, for some people to get there on Tuesday nights, because especially if they're going to Grace for dinner or to make sure that they get signed up for cold weather shelter, we don't want them to lose the ability to also have some support in that space. So we are going to move Sober Support to Saturdays. Saturday afternoons at 3:00, they will begin to meet, and they will meet down at our Family Connection building, which is right next door to our church. So if that's something that you're interested in getting involved in, it's a little bit different group. It doesn't necessarily follow like a formal 12-step program or anything like that, but it just is a place that's very relational, lots of conversations, lots of support, and being reminded that you're not alone in that battle as well. So if you're interested in learning more about Sober Support, shoot us a message and we'll help you get connected to that. So next Saturday will be the next meeting that they have for that. And then the last thing that I have for you tonight, before we close out this virtual connection space, is just Christmas Eve. We toyed with the idea of trying to find some place that we could gather together in person for Christmas Eve, but we are actually going to be gathering for New Year's Eve at the Outreach Center, and doing kind of a fun night of board games and just hanging out. And that will be a sober space. So we will be virtual for Christmas Eve. We will be doing kind of our traditional, it's a little different traditional, but our traditional Christmas Eve service, which will just be a mixture of scripture and song and prayer and just some moments of quiet meditation. And so we invite you to join us. It's going to be at 6:00 on that Saturday night, which just falls at our regular time. But it'll be a beautiful time to just kind of take a break with the hustle and bustle of Christmas Eve and whatever that schedule may be, and just light a candle and sit and just kind of take a few deep breaths and be reminded of that space and that holy space. So we hope you'll join us for that. So anything else that you have?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much. We will see you back next week, and we will go from there. Bye, everybody.